So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and we are making a return to MINAS ITHIL today, which is a map we haven't seen in quite some time. This is still the good aligned one, in spite of the fact that the Ashy Mountains are still all about it. We have got the Gondorian style architecture rather than the blackened Minas Morgul. So this is going to be fairly interesting. I mean, it's not a lore-friendly battle, this one, by any means. I think we've got a fully evil defense on the good aligned version of the city, which is a little bit strange, but we also have a really weird selection of attackers as well, so that's worth bearing in mind as the battle continues. So let's go through the attacking armies first and foremost. Let's waste no time. We know about MINAS ITHIL. I mean, it's a fairly standard settlement in many ways. It's just the architecture which makes the difference, which can also make a bit of a catastrophic difference to the frame rate depending upon how many of the walls get crumbled at once, but we still have to wait and see on that count. We'll start off with DF Mark. He has got some Spears of Orthanc on the front. I mean, when you're playing as Dunland, bringing the Spears of Orthanc is a complete no-brainer. They're going to obviously have the abilities in melee that the other Dunlanders don't have, but mainly they're being brought here for their crossbow prowess. Got some Dunlanding veterans as well. Obviously, your options when it comes to line infantry are somewhat limited. The Dunlanding veterans are lower end line infantry, but they do that job well enough, and the fact that they're wielding an axe as well gives them a little bit more damage than they would otherwise have. We've got some Aguathlo trackers, we've got some Snaga skirmishers hidden in and amongst all the half-orc spear guard, which, as far as the line infantry unit goes, to be fair, they will take a lot more punishment than the Dunlanding veterans, but the spear malice does mean they won't be dishing out quite as much damage either. The Bane Guard, very much a different story. You can see there's a few Bane Guards in there. They're going to be able to dish out plenty of armor-piercing damage, which will be useful given the fact we've already caught a glimpse of Angmar on the defence. I think we may have to refer to this as Minas Morgul, to be honest with you, if it turns out all of the defenders are evil. A bit of false advertising never hurt anyone. We've got some Trollshot Axe Throwers, we've got some Dunman Spearmen, that's the name of the unit. But yeah, Dunland, pretty standard fare as you'd expect, a very large army, but also interspersed with a couple of units of genuine quality. Next, we have Two Times over here, who's playing as Mirkwood. Obviously Mirkwood very much out of place in and amongst this sea of evil factions, but Thranduil wanting to get involved, I suppose. Spears of Emondui, I mean, to be fair, Mirkwood, when it comes to being an attacking faction, are maybe not the best, because it's where all of their weaknesses can really be brought to light if the defenders can bottle them up and start taking advantage of their lighter nature. Hiri Peng are in there as well with the armour upgrade. I mean, Mirkwood can upgrade their armour, which does mitigate those problems somewhat. Woodland Realm Patrol are in there. Got some Woodland Protectors. There are also the Palace Guard. You can see their glaives poking through. Some more Spears of Emondui, some Blades of Emondui, the Swordsman variant, but kind of hard to tell. There's, you know, Greenwood Rangers as well, but it's going to be quite difficult to use Rangers on a map like this, to be honest, if the defenders are doing their due diligence. And there's some Blades of Emondui as well. Excuse me. Now then, Mordor, played by Darthy Darth. Lots of Moran on infantry. A couple of units of Sauron's Will. Got some Orc fodder over here as well. This is what does worry me somewhat, the Troll Catapult, because it's a means of crumbling the walls. Man, my voice is already falling apart. And yeah, the walls crumbling on this map has proven to be a problem in the past, more so on the Minas Morgul version of the map, which is perhaps why it wasn't being used. I'd hope that's the case. Olag High. We've got a couple of units of Blackguard of Barad-dûr as well for pushing through those gaps, but yeah, fairly numerous army this. Also Temple Executioners, Uruk Captains and Nazgul over here, forming up the little elite section of the Mordor army, which we very often see, but it is a numerous army, and that will help the attacker's cause most certainly. When the orcs are on the defence as well, it does mean that you kind of need a little bit of an extra oomph, to be honest. There is presumably another army down here. Dunland, yes, DF Mark, he's got some Blackwolds, so it's a 3v2. One unit of Blackwolds back here, if he forgot to move them to the front, but so they're going to have to take the long route round. So, the evil aligned Minas ITHIL. We have Angmar, played by Fire Captain Les McBurney. Got some Snaga Stalkers, some Guardians of Khan Doom, Orc Fellas back here as well, so armour piercing, but mostly Angmar are going to be here to be the bulwark, surely. I mean, combined with Isengard, I believe it was. This is going to be a very defensively savvy duo. Snaga Stalkers, some Warg Skirmish as well. I mean, if you're going to have cavalry in a siege battle, having Javelin cavalry does make a lot of sense, because even if you can't use the cavalry for their fast moving or their high mass charge, you can still use them for their javelins ultimately, so you can still get something out of them. More Warg Skirmishers, some Barrow Wights, some Scourge Raiders, a Catapult as well, which on a map like this can be absolutely devastating. And yeah, Son of the Dunedain I'm playing as Isengard, got some Uruk-hai infantry, got some Blackwatch Legion as well, so they're going to be able to defend with Great Shield infantry. Be interesting to see if we see a clash of those two units. Uruk-hai pikemen, I was going to almost completely disintegrated with my speech there. Uruk-hai Berserkers, we've got some Trolls of Angmar and some Trolls from Isengard, the Trolls of the White Hand. Some Uruk-hai crossbows, Nazkai, obviously very dangerous to the attackers here. Some Dunlanding clansmen, so some of the Dunlanders electing to stay with Saruman. Got some Trolls of Gundabad in there as well. And then on the front, some Gundabad Guard, obviously a good heavy spear for holding the line. Champions of the White Hand, obviously very, very dangerous. Can they be used effectively on a map like this? We'll see. Scourge Raiders, Barrow Wights, and then some more Witchram Pikemen as well. And some Lurtz Hunting Pack there at the back. So often on Minas Ithil, because it's more than a 3v2 a lot of the time, we actually do see this section in front of the fortress used. They try and hold the bridge, and then there's a bit of a killing field that happens over there as well. On this occasion, though, because it's a 3v2, I'd be very surprised if the fight didn't happen entirely within the settlement, or at least upon its walls. I don't think the defenders will sally out. Maybe I'm wrong, though, and we'll find out, because 50k frames is quite a lot for a battle replay that is only a 3v2, but there will be a little bit of a cut because the attackers will need to move their way into position first and foremost. The defenders will also need to make up their mind on what they're doing. So yeah, I'll make a cut and we'll rejoin when the battle for Minas Ithil is getting underway. So I think we will rejoin here. There has been a little bit of very minor skirmishing up until this point, but it seems like the outer part of the settlement is going to be used. The Lurtz Hunting Pack here firing away at some of the Mordor orcs that have positioned themselves here. The Troll Catapult and the Orc Fodder leading the way. Interesting to see the Troll Catapult leading the way. We may be seeing this, to peel away at some of the walls, which we'll learn very quickly if the frame rate is to exponentially deteriorate based upon that. We've also got Dunlanders who are lining up on this bridge. A little bit of skirmishing coming across from the one Elven faction that's on display. But there are these buildings in the way. They are managing to land a few hits, but it's on rather basic units. When you're on the attack, this is still kind of worthwhile to do, however, because if you do manage to kill off even enough basic units, the defenders simply won't have the numbers left to be able to withstand. Champions of the White Hand moving forward. I thought that was simply more orcs for a second then, but I mean, the Orc Fodder are here to try and prevent this from being such a problem, but the Champions of the White Hand are capable of crunching through Orc Fodder just fine. The Trolls themselves don't want to be the ones to take a direct charge, however, and indeed that was not the case. I don't think any of the Trolls actually died in these cycle charges, but Darthy Darth is going to need to bail out his catapult crew a little bit, and then they're going to need to return to remount their artillery. Some combat Trolls coming in here now, though, and Trolls the White Hand, of course, as the arrows rip through the Orc Fodder and they rout very, very quickly. I mean, Orc Fodder not going to be up to much against Trolls and being cycle charged as well by various wargs. Angmar now joining in as well. So, I mean, this is one thing that Orc Fodder can be used for as a sort of barricade against cavalry charges. But one thing you have to remember is even though they are spears, they are one of the most basic units of spears that the game has to offer. So if you can charge into them and do a lot of damage, they're going to rout like this, unless you have them backed up with other infantry units as well. So just sending them forward on their own, once again, fodder tier units alone are not going to be all that effective. And now Angmar really trying to twist the knife a little bit with some Scourge Raiders. They're going to be very good at carving their way through basic units in melee. So things not the best of starts here for Mordor, and I mean, Isengard and Angmar now have ample reason to keep up the pressure over here, because the longer they can keep this catapult out of Mordor's hands, the longer their walls are going to remain standing. Meanwhile, over here, despite the fact they've got two armies to play with, there's still not a whole lot of movement on that part of Dunland, or indeed Mirkwood. Mirkwood, however, getting their Greenwood Rangers right in front of this defensive position. I mean, they will be able to... They're actually shooting at something else. I was kind of expecting them to shoot through there. I mean, Gundabad Guard maybe not most important unit. They are shooting into the backs of these units. Once again, like I said, Mirkwood don't have to be quite so stingy with their ammunition, given that it is a battle in which they have the numerical advantage, but still, when it comes to rangers, you would be hoping for a slightly better angle than that. Moranon infantry coming around the houses to engage with the Scourge Raiders. They will at least be a little bit better at withstanding damage than the Orc fodder were, but they're still very much out of their depth here, you'd have to say. Javelin fire now coming in as well from the Warg skirmishers. Still the support of the Lurt's hunting pack as well. And with the Trolls of the White Hand in close attendance. I don't know. This is not the easiest of starts here for Mordor. One Moranon infantry moving forward. They have at least managed to rescue their catapult. They may be better off actually simply knocking through one of the walls here rather than trying to go for the bit that has units on top of it. If you simply go through the wall here, you can then start to funnel into the city, and that would really give the defenders something to think about then, because they're going to have to defend from multiple angles, and suddenly the outside of the settlement becomes less of a safe bet to try and hang on to. And Moranon infantry are wavering in spite of the fact there are still so many of them left alive as well, so that's going to be a little bit worrying for Mordor. Maybe some units of slightly higher quality needed on the front line here to help tie things together. The Moranon, I mean, it's not too surprising to see them wavering. They're getting charged by wargs, they're getting pummeled by Isengard's trolls, and they're in melee with a unit that's very capable of dealing a decent amount of damage in the Scourge Raiders, and they have nothing but their bread and butter units to fall back upon. And these are big routes here from Mordor. It's not the sort of thing they can afford to sustain too much of. And you can see back there, elite units gathering dust. Sauron's will. I mean, there's also some Dunlanders over here in the Black Wilds. Javelin's going to get in position. Moranon infantry reforming a little bit. I mean, the skirmishers, if you do bog them down in melee, they're not going to be as scary as the champions of the White Hand, but so far, I have to say, the defenders have done a nice job with their cavalry. On a map where cavalry is not necessarily going to be the easiest thing to use, but it does look as though another front is now opening up. But we're going to see something very similar over here, a combination of the Barrow Wights, Pikemen and Gunpad Guard. It's going to be all too easy for them to hold the Dunlanders at bay here. I mean, the Black Wolds are in there. Black Wolds will do a decent amount of damage, but the thing is, the Barrow Wights are such a tar pit in melee like this that it's going to take you so long to mulch your way through this front line, which is perhaps why this is going to be quite a long battle overall. If Dunland are going to be continuously banging their head against that particular wall. The elves have got in here walls crumbling, so maybe Darthy is taking my advice. I mean, the elves themselves don't have the kind of army you usually expect them to have in terms of quality, but I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem. Both units of Angmar trolls as well. I mean, they could be going for an alpha strike here on this initial Dunland assault and simply trying to cripple it pretty quickly. Looks like the wargs are pulling back. Maybe just a general retreat now. Trolls of the White Hand coming back for another charge alongside the champions of the same name. Moranon infantry breaking once again. I don't know if they'll be coming back following this. Yes, the frame rate's taking a nosedive there, as is often the way in maps with custom architecture when the walls start to be crumbled. The Sniper Stalker's getting into melee as well, so they're not leaving anything to chance on this front line, Angmar. They really are bolstering the defence to the point where if Dunland want to get through, they're going to have to commit an awful lot. Some Guathlo trackers just in behind, trying to fire away, do some damage to the units they can see across the way, maybe give Mordor the in they needed. I mean, if I were Mirkwood as well, or perhaps Dunland, I would be sending over some units to maybe assist a little bit more so with Mordor's push. You already have a foothold on this side of the river after all, and it's much better than simply funneling units into their death across this very narrow bridge, but it is what it is. Still, this wall has not been destroyed as of yet. 75% damage. Where is the catapult? There it is, just reforming itself. The siege tower in place. Are the Sauron's will going to get up onto the walls and contest it? Maybe that's why they stopped, actually. Although they're not going to be able to cross over this way any longer. Regardless of that, Dunland clansmen, I mean, they're not going to be the best at holding the line, but considering the damage the Moran infantry have already taken en masse, javelins in behind now also giving the Isengard trolls and riders something to think about. Slowly but surely Mordor regathering their composure for the continued push. Catapult's still moving forward. Did one of them get destroyed? It did. What from? Arrowfire can destroy catapults, I think, but not quite as efficiently as it can do in Silmarillion. Blackwatch Legion pushing through. Bit of a counter push there, but against not a huge amount of units, you'd have to say. Some Dunland Spearmen moving in. I mean, the Elven units will do a little bit better on the front line, but they're still only the basic Emendwyrs. Some Half-Orc Bane Guard certainly won't go amiss there. That is perhaps the reason why the Angmar trolls have elected to retreat from that situation. Barrow Whites doing their thing. Back over here, Champions of the White Hand still charging forwards, and still a combination of the White Hand trolls and the White Hand riders have been the bane of Mordor's existence so far in this battle, and still throwing more and more Moran infantry under the bus. Unfortunately, we're not seeing this battle from the perspective of Isengard, because I'd be really interested to see just how many kills these trolls have gotten, and indeed there's a bit of a battle between trolls here, and unsurprisingly, the White Hand troll managing to cut down one of his brethren from the south and east. Dunland clansmen offering a little bit of support as well. That is always the key with trolls, a little bit of backup for them does go a long way. Take some of the heat off them, and while the Dunland clansmen won't be able to do much damage themselves, their presence alone will be enough here to continue to make life miserable for these Mordor orcs. There is always one lightning rod within the attacking army usually, but I think they would have been hoping that it wasn't Mordor on this occasion because of the positioning of where they are on the map. Dunland and Mirkwood continue to throw themselves against this defensive wall. Spears of Orthanc are in position. If they can get a good shot, then that could be the sort of thing which does turn their fortunes around somewhat. They can still move the trolls forward again. This is actually one of the best use of trolls from the defenders here that I've seen in a little while. They've been committing them at regular intervals, moving them in, and eventually of course the trolls will start to falter. That's what they do by their very nature, but they've managed to really make the most out of a unit which can deal damage in high bursts. I mean, you don't Blackwolds being on the front line, that was what was destroying catapults, the throwing axes from the Scourge Raiders, but that's really unfortunate for the attackers that they have now. I think there's only there's one catapult remaining, so they still can make a hole in the wall, which they should really be doing. They can use siege towers, but it would be, again, it's less reliable if the defenders choose to try and contest the walls, but these Saurons will are just sort of biding their time and waiting for now. Snaga Skirmish is actually in a relatively safe position now because of the gap in the wall that has been made, so using the damage to their advantage, knowingly or otherwise, Snaga Skirmishers raining javelins down from on high. Some good hits being landed here. Orc Skirmishers. Uruk-hai crossbows now joining in as well, so thus far the defenders have done quite well, but then they need to when outnumbered like this. Mordor now committing their trolls to the fight as well, so hoping to have similar success to Isengard. Indeed, we have still got a little bit of a battle between the trolls here. A rare enough thing. The Uruk-hai are healthier than the trolls of the White Hand, but excuse me. The Uruk-hai also have to contend with a unit of Scourge Raiders on foot. They're doing a lot of damage to them very quickly, but perhaps it can tilt the balance in their favour. No, the White Hand Trolls are leaving anyway. So still the Trolls of the White Hand moving over here to feast upon the low-hanging fruit, as it were, but they've had such great success at doing this so far in the battle that they'd be kind of mad not to, really. Champions of the White Hand also charging forward again and managing to break the Orc Javelins. Maybe a bit of naivete here from Darthy Darth. There hasn't really been a great deal of support. He's really been throwing his units into the meat grinder without too much in the way of plan Bs most of the time. And his army really is starting to look a bit tattered and torn. Mirkwood are coming over here now, but maybe it is a little late. Better late than never, I suppose, but they are going to need far more of that. Isengard will be extremely happy with their day's work so far. Mordor trying to make up some ground, and they are doing so. I mean, these Scourge Raiders are getting stomped into the dirt, really, by the Olag Kai, but I mean, Warg Skirmishers, a charge from the Champions of the White Hand, especially when they're densely packed like this, might be enough. Yeah, a few of them dying off there, and now in sustained melee. Trolls can do very well against cavalry in sustained melee, but the Champions of the White Hand can give as good as they get with those big hooked swords. And that's going to be the end of the Olag Kai, I think, so, or at least for the most part, as an effective fighting force, most certainly. Now then, Mirkwood may be taking the reins a little bit more on this front line. There's still the Vanguard, but less of a concern for the defenders, I think, because, like I said, the Barrow Wights offer you such a good backstop as far as a defensive unit goes that you can just sort of commit them and then forget about them, especially when they're backed up by pikes like this. It makes for, if you're trying to go through in pure melee terms, you really need to be using brute force, I think. But that's easier said than done for a faction as low quality as Dunland and as lightweight as Mirkwood. They're not really designed for trying to bludgeon their way through a prepared Angmar front line like that. The other way, of course, is by using your skirmishers, but there was never really a good opportunity or angle to utilise something like the Greenwood Rangers, which would have been maybe a little bit more ideal. You're starting to hear a bit more rubble crumbling now. And they are going to knock a hole in the wall. Not the one they were initially planning on doing, but I think they have been forced into doing that somewhat by the good organisation of the defenders. Guardians of Kharndoon moving forward, so Angmar clearly not eager on giving this defensive position up. They are taking hits from the spears of Orthanc on the approach, but another unit which will be another defensively sound unit, which will make life more difficult for the attackers. Still supporting around patrol. Maybe try and get some, trying to arc their shots a little bit. The problem with this is so many of those Angmar units are either shielded or the Barrow Wights. The only good target would be the Witchround Pikemen, but they're so deeply embedded in their front line that you can't be sure that that's what you're going to be hitting. Still got some upper end units. Dunland, of course, have still got plenty of manpower, as you would well expect. Finally, one of the walls does crumble. Mordor do have another way in, but do they have the manpower to spread themselves that thin now? These guys are looking comfortable. And that might be a new addition to the map. I've never seen that particular statue before. I don't think this map has been updated since then, however, so maybe it's just me being blind in the past. Outright victory here. The attack does fall apart. So far so good for the defenders, but this does mean they actually have now a clear shot with their archers. As I mentioned before, though, so many of these units are going to be pretty good under arrow fire like this, so not the end of the world by any means. The frame rate is not exponentially deteriorating, however, so that does mean it is purely a MINAS Morgul problem. Defeat seems certain, only a military genius could win this battle. Further back, still got some Sauron's Will. Dunland clansmen are routing back to their town centre. The troll catapult is here. They're going to try and hit some of the infantry down the way. Well, they were, at least until that routing unit passed through them, and that means that I think that's going to delay them just enough. So fortune is smiling on the defenders here. And now the champions, the White Hand, are coming back to charge in, and considering how bloodied all of these trolls already are, yeah, and you can see instantaneously that one dying. I don't know if that was because the charge actually landed. I mean, like I said, trolls usually good against cavalry and melee, but this is one of the very best and most savage melee cavalry units in the game against the very weakest trolls in combat. And now as well, with the trolls of Gundabad coming in here, this could be the end of the troll catapult. They've had a really torrid time, Mordor, in trying to use their catapult in the way they would have liked, but the defenders have done a good job at really pushing them to and fro. They have managed to save their trolls, so they should once again be able to remount this catapult once they take this territory. But again, Spears of Emenduir, Spearman not really the answer against trolls. You may think the opposite in real life against something like this. A spear is probably what you would want, but because they classify as infantry and the spear malice is in effect against them, it means you're doing even less damage to a unit that's already individually very, very tanky, and they themselves are going to be able to rip and tear their way through units like this. There are some blades of Emenduir in there as well, however. Still some Snaga up here. Going after the Woodland Round Patrol, are we? Or are they readjusting their targets now? Don't know what they're doing, really. Like a bit of a blank shot. Sauron's Will coming down for the ball. This is finally what they would have been hoping for, Mordor, getting a unit of heavy axemen in and amongst the trolls. Exactly the sort of thing which can deal damage to them very, very quickly. And Mirkwood actually pushing their way through quite a bit now, stretching the troll units, forcing them into more uncomfortable engagements. This is not what I would have done, though, if I were Darthy. Darthy hasn't retreated his troll catapult far enough, and Angmar really eager on making sure that Mordor cannot utilise their artillery anymore in this fight. Javelin still back there. Another unit which could be used to good effect. I mean, the Blackguard of Barad-dûr are here, but the key with them is you need to follow through with a pretty substantial assault to make their gains stick. I don't know if Mordor have got the ability to do that anymore with how many losses they've taken. Some javelins coming in from the Snaga skirmishers, landing some hits, and that's certainly better than nothing, with some Baneguard on the front line as well to help deal armour-piercing damage to those pikemen and guardians. It's slow progress over here, but they haven't taken as many losses as Mordor, so they've still got a little bit more breathing room than their ally, who is already inside the settlement. The rather disparate nature of these attacks may very well be a pretty big player as the battle enters its concluding moments. Guardians of Kharndoon taking a few hits there, I believe, from some Spears of Orthanc, but more reinforcements heading to the front line, really not eager to allow the attackers to cross that bridge for as long as possible. And why not? I mean, it's a narrow choke point and there's no other way around for these armies over here. Mordor need to be careful to actually not overextend themselves here, because if they go too aggressive, I mean, you can see here Sauron's Will getting cut down. If they go too aggressive, however, the problem that they're going to run into is they're going to run out of army, basically. They're going to completely be eliminated while their allies are still fighting at the bridge, and then it becomes a one choke point battle for the attackers, which is not what you want to be seeing at all. Another unit of Sauron's Will moving forward, still the defending trolls alive to varying extents, both Angmar trolls and the trolls of the White Hand. Again, just another example of how well the defensive trolls have been utilised. A real thorn in the attacker's side. Gundabad Guard rallying around as well, Snaga skirmishers throwing their javelins in. Even this Mirkwood force is starting to think about routing, and they do. Captains, I mean, I think Mordor, they do have enough in terms of quality and numbers to mount one big assault, but if they're going to do that, they should wait until their allies are in position and ready to do so as well. still plenty of these units. I mean, Isengard still have got a lot of line-holding units as well, like infantry and pikes, which we have yet to see, really. Most of Isengard's contributions to the battle so far have been with cavalry and javelin support and trolls, whereas most of the heavy lifting infantry-wise has been done by Angmar, so Angmar have taken more losses, but it just means that Isengard are going to be well prepared for what awaits inside the settlement. Spears of Orthanc taking hits, so we've seen this before where a very weakened unit of throwing projectiles is basically left to its own devices. You can't really afford to do this because slowly but surely they will be killing individual units, and especially when those units are Spears of Orthanc. Like, this is not what you need. This is not the way. Yeah, this may seem like a waste of ammunition, and technically speaking it is, but it's necessary, otherwise you're going to be suffering the death by 1,000 cuts that you don't want to be seeing. More Elven units arriving to support the Bane Guard, and that's good, because the Bane Guard themselves, while they can do damage to the Guardians of Carnarvon, they themselves are not the most defensively sound unit. Among shock infantry units like this, maybe they are a little bit tankier, but they're going to need support still as shock infantry units if they hope to fight the long war. Snaga, Witchrealm, Pikemen still here, so Angmar still do have a presence. High Crossbowman? Is there something they can hit down there? I mean, it's been a real killing field out there. What's going on over here? Snaga skirmishers from Isengard, the Witchers from Angmar. A few dead Isengard riders as well. The Witcher's getting committed to melee is an interesting one. Troll Catapult technically still alive, albeit it is the banner carrier, so it is now a defunct artillery piece. A little fight going on in this corner of the city as well. Orc javelins once again being introduced to trolls. More of these low tier units being feasted upon. The Nazgul are over here. I mean, again, like the Nazgul, they need support. I'm not really certain what the thought process is here from Mordor. I mean, if you have a look, they've clearly been saving their elite units for the most part, as well as 2 units of Blackguard of Barad-dûr, but it's a very bizarre setup, this. You need to be very careful of the Witchers here. Mordor can't afford to be taking a hit from the Witchers at this point, because that would be enough to grill the vast majority of their army. The onus is kind of on Dunland and Mirkwood, however, to at least try and pick up the pace a little bit here. I mean, it is easier said than done against an Angmar front line like this, but there does come a point where you're going to need to throw forward more than what you've been doing, because the pace you've been moving at has been not conducive to your ultimate victory, shall we say. Mordor themselves are, you know, for as much as I would criticise some of the decision making, they have at least been making progress through the map. But that's only really going to be able to stick if their allies also start doing the same. This sort of asymmetrical progress, in the end, I don't think is going to favour the attackers all that much. The Witchers, yeah, so the Orc Javelin's finished. The Sauron's will still here. The Trolls not wanting any part of that, however, the Blackguard of Barad-dûr moving in, and then promptly retreating once more. So that will scurrying away. Still got a bit of ammunition in those Scourge Raiders as well, despite their exertions outside the walls. That's hunting pack probably out of ammunition by now because they were used outside the walls as well. The Trolls to White Hand once again wandering around out here looking for new prey. There's not really anything in Mordor's army though, other than maybe the Blackguard of Barad-dûr that you would fancy their chances against. Like Templar Executioners will kill them very quickly in their current state. Even the Uric Captains with that armor piercing, not ideal. Nazgul, of course, kind of similar to the Trolls in many ways, albeit more of a slower burn in terms of their killing potential than them. Orc Fellas now being transitioned to the front line, a significantly more fragile unit, and you can see that by how quickly they are actually falling in the face of the elven arrow fire coming at them from the other side of the bridge. Try and fire arrows. I mean, the Barrow Wights won't rout, they are locked morale. The Orc Fellows very much will, however. Dunlanding veterans are shaken, more reinforcements needed quickly before the routing gets underway. Obviously the Barrow Wights are quite a fearsome foe, so we can forgive them a little bit of trepidation when looking at fighting them. Mordor. Blackguard of Barad-dûr. Like I said though, these kinds of units are not the best in sustained melee. They're not the worst by any means, but this kind of combat is not really what they're designed for, and with Gundabad Guard ready and waiting, trolls moving in as well, so with support again these trolls being used to fantastic effect. Mordor once again the one paying the price. Elsewhere, Uruk captains moving in, are they going to try and go around? There is another fight going on over here, but there's simply not enough Sauron's will, and far too many Barrow Wights still alive. It's a real crutch that Angmar are capable of using, but Angmar very much are a faction with their focus. Guard, to be fair, they have actually been given the business a little bit by the Blackguard of Barad-dûr. Spears may be a little bit more dependent on having good unit cohesion, and the Blackguard of Barad-dûr were able to disrupt that, but in turn the Trolls are going to be able to do the same to the Mordor Great Shield Infantry. Sauron's Will. The Uruk captains have not... yeah, they've turned back around and they're going to try and kill the Trolls off, I assume. Better late than never, I suppose, but the Witches are in melee as well. I don't know, have the Witches used their ammunition? Is that something I missed? Did they use it out here? Maybe, because I mean that looks distinctly like patches of burnt units. It's only Blackguard of Barad-dûr though, so it's... oh, no wait, the Witches did just use another volley. The Uruk captains shaken as a result of said volley, which is most certainly not the equal of the Nazgûl in melee, however, but they kind of need to chase them down here, and that means that they're once again going through the Trolls, giving them free hits. It has been such a difficult fight for Mordor. This will be the ultimate test if having one player get dumpstered in this fashion, and can the attackers still go on to win it with Dunland and Mirkwood. I mean, probably a fairer test if Dunland and Mirkwood themselves hadn't also taken a fair amount of damage, and they are still being held at arm's length. Some more javelins coming in. Very slow going on the front line. They will eventually push through here, and then they themselves will be able to subject the settlement to an attack as well, but by the time they get there I really do think that Mordor will probably be dead with how slow this has been going. Woodland Protectors and Greenwood Rangers ready. They're very lucky actually that Angmar have got their attention elsewhere, otherwise those Warg skirmishers could be cycle charging them as we speak. I've got here some more Snaga Stalkers from Angmar, getting in the way of the Nazgûl. That's a very lopsided engagement when it comes down to individual dueling, but Angmar just getting units in the way of what Mordor have remaining. Uruk captains fleeing the area. Did the Witches die? I don't think they did. I'd be very surprised. No, yeah. They're still over here. Are they still running? Yeah, they are. Angmar been trying to give Mordor the runaround. Ooh, and a point-blank volley there. I think that's quite unfortunate for Mordor, really, because they were doing a pretty good job of keeping pace with them, but managing to get one last volley into Mordor before the Witches ultimately perish. A little bit more good fortune there for the defenders, I think, than good play, but it is what it is when your luck's in. And I think the defenders have also made their own luck to a certain extent. Mordor were forced into chasing those Witches down, and it was always somewhat likely to end in disaster for them. The Witchhelm Scourge Raiders having already thrown a few throwing axes into the back of the Nazgul. The Nazgul themselves will need a bit of support, and that will be forthcoming from whatever Mordor have remaining to them. I think the Temple Executioners are the only thing they have remaining outside the walls. Yes, indeed it is. Wooden round patrol from Mirkwood on the way in. It says there's a defending unit over here somewhere. I think it's just a routing unit, but Mirkwood with a little bit more support, but again it's just archers, they're out of ammunition. I mean, it does give them a little bit more in terms of numbers, for sure. And the defenders can't overcommit on Mordor at this point, they just need to keep them contained and slowly whittle them down, which this kind of javelin fire will be perfect for, because they do ultimately need to recognise that the main threat, long term in this battle, is going to be over here. And finally, Dunland and Mirkwood managing to push through, they see the opportunity. The Barrow Wights don't have a lot of mass after all, so when it was starting to become just them and a few other disparate units left, pushing through them was always going to be the way to go, and taking away their melee defense by turning it into a real mosh pit of an engagement like this is also going to result in their hastened defeat. So this is exactly what the attackers needed. Dunland, primarily Dunland, but also what Mirkwood have in terms of their stronger units. Maybe some Greenwood Rangers as well. Warg skirmishers hunted down and broken ultimately by some Mirkwood spears. So finally some good news here for the attackers. Now they just need to reform, batter their way through the gates, and then start attacking. But already a bit of a retreat underway from the defenders. So they're going to try and consolidate around the town centre perhaps, rather than fighting street to street. I would have preferred them to fight on the streets, to be fair. I think it would have made for a slightly more chaotic battle, but Snaga skirmishers. What have we over here? Nazgul alongside Woodland Round Patrol. Sort of situation, would elves march alongside Nazgul? Maybe if madness took them? Barrow Wights victorious over here in totality. Where are the pikemen waiting? I mean, the Barrow Wights are very slow, so it will take them a little while to get back into defensive position. There's Uruk-hai crossbow now as well, going after the attackers as they push through. Hold on a minute, what is going on here? Excuse me? Oh, I see, okay. I mean, this is never going to work, but I mean, at least it'll probably induce a little bit of panic in the defenders. Blackguard of Barad-dûr managing to push their way all the way to the town centre here, at the centre of the great fortress. What remains of the Trolls of the White Hand, first and foremost. There's also the defending catapult, which we have yet to see employed. Keep a little eye on that, but it's ultimately not going to be too important in this fight, I don't think. We are starting to see a little bit more in terms of frame dipping, which I'm a little bit concerned about. It's not quite as hot as it has been the last couple of days, but I'm still a little bit concerned about recording in this kind of heat on my older PC. Temple Executioners have also made it a fair distance as well, all on their own, but they are also isolated against some of Isengard's stronger units. The Lurtz hunting back are in their pikes as well, are going to be able to try and keep the Black Numenorians at arm's length. So I'm not sure whether, I mean, maybe a little bit more of a Hail Mary this than anything else from Mordor, but this, a large part of this, I mean, you could say that Mordor have been maybe a little bit too hasty, but you could also say that Dunland and Mirkwood have been far too slow. Little of column A, little of column B, and the defenders have reacted accordingly to this. I'm not sure, this might be a little bit of an overreaction though, to weed out the Blackguard of Barad-dûr that have made it to the TC. They still have a defending catapult here as well, which in an opening like this, I mean, I'm sure that we've all played a divide and conquer campaign where having a piece of artillery in an opening like this on one of the custom settlements is basically a green light to defeat the AI's most powerful armies. Uruk-hai crossbows, pikes, Victory seems certain for the Witchround pikemen. Only a fool could lose this battle. Yeah, they've also sent back like Uruk-hai berserkers and stuff to finish off the Blackguard Marauders. I mean, again, it may have been a bit of a desperation move, but it has at least lit a fire under the defenders. Maybe they were feeling hyper-confident after the gains they had made, and that may not be the case now. Those Trolls of the White Hand are still alive. Still Temple Executions left, but 44 of them. Trying to stop Barrow-wights from getting back there. I mean, Barrow-wights on the front line, backed up by a catapult. Elite Isengard units, including pikes and the like. It's not looking particularly good. The main gate of Minas, and technically it's Minas ITHIL, but I will be referring to, I think, in the title of the video as Minas Mordor because of the fact that it's almost entirely evil factions on display today, mostly Orcish ones. The Misty Mountains, the only ones missing. The player from whom we're watching the perspective of this battle is Mirkwood, the one player who... There's always someone that likes to be different. Temple Executioners is still taking javelins. Those basic Snaga skirmishers have also been used to good effect by the defenders throughout this battle. Mordor's general does fall, run through by an Uruk-hai pike. Some spears of Orthanc over here though as well, coming to the aid of the Temple Executioners, who are still actually in decent health, 36 of them. I think we will actually be going up to ×2 speed here, because it's mostly a fighting, kind of a fighting retreat by the defenders as they move back to the inner sanctum. The rest of the settlement is largely free of their influence. The main gate finally does fall, but with no opposition to it. Units arriving here, so I mean it's not an insubstantial army that remains. Trolls from axe throwers. I mean the problem is though so much of Dunland's potential can be bound up in stuff like those axe throwers, basic units as well. There are stronger elven units still to come as well, so it's it could yet prove to be a closer battle than my commentary so far has maybe been suggesting. But right, anyway. The benefit of being the attackers when you have a significant numbers advantage like this is that you're never really out of the battle. The defenders can put themselves out of the battle very easily, but not necessarily the case. These Barrow-wights being isolated and destroyed, the Blades of Emondwe are blocking their path, and this is where their lack of mass really does come into play as well, because it means they can't get through. They simply have to sit there and fight. And that will be a loss, because it means that it's the last of the Barrow-wights that the defenders have available to them that are being defeated now. Any kills they can get against the Temple Executioners and Spears of Orthanc, however, I'm sure will be greatly welcomed. Victory seems certain, only a fool could lose. Balance of forces is evenly matched. It's weird how Medieval 2 calculates that when they're facing off against certain units. Sometimes you can really wonder what it's on about. Here he firing over the walls. This isn't the most efficient way, but I don't know if they really have too much of a choice. They need to try and make use of what range supporting units they have left. I mean, it's one of the things that they have clearly tried to conserve. What are they doing? Rangers are just blocking what remains of the pathway the Barrow-wights have left. Very eager to make sure that none of those wraiths make it back into the defensive position. What was that? It's just a pen. Still more Palace Guard. So good quality remaining. I think I'm actually rooting for the defenders here more than anything, because I think that they have played this battle very well. I think the attackers as well have been a little bit disparate in their goals, so I think it would be a little bit... There wouldn't be much justice, I think, if the attackers were going to win this, but it does go to show how well the defenders need to play when outnumbered like this to have success. Here Pang have actually got a more linear shot now, going after this one Gundabad guardsman, with his back turn no less. Doesn't even need his shield to withstand this elven onslaught. And the elves actually give up. Wisely so as well, you don't want to be using a whole volley to kill one spearman off. So, the battle for the heart of the fortress begins. The Greenwood Rangers, the first ones to come in here, and yet more kills being fed into the Trolls of the White Hand. I'm really disappointed we won't get to see how many kills these guys have got. It's probably not like on a ridiculous level, but it's just the timing of how and when they've been used has been the impressive thing. Spears of Orthanc moving in. They need to be a little bit more consolidated here though. I mean, looking at the defenders, they have got some decent forces left, including pikes, Guards of Orthanc, but I mean, Nazkai are obviously quite scary, and so are Berserkers, but with a little bit of elven quality, with the numbers that Dunland have available to them, this could be the way. This, I don't think, isn't the way that Spears of Orthanc would have been hoping to be utilised, getting hit by yet more javelins, already bloodied up. Skirmishers doing their thing. Uruk-hai crossbows, of course, returning the favour as well, so this isn't going to end well at all for the very best that Dunland have to offer. If that had hit, then they probably would have routed. One blade of Emondria dies to the Lurt's hunting pack. There's no need to really use the catapult here. I know that moving forward in high numbers from Dunland and Mirkwood would simply invite the wrath of that artillery, but I don't think there's much to be done about that. We're going to have to face it at some point, so it may as well rip that band-aid off. Go up to times 2 speed once again, because I do feel as though once again the attackers being cautious. I think we're actually going to have to go up to times 6 speed here. This is going to be one big assault, I think, though, because we are getting to the point where the final 10,000 frames are upon us. That isn't a great deal of time in the grand scheme of things in this battle. The Hiri Peng poking through, trying to go after yet more of these Uruk-hai crossbowmen. Javelins doing their thing, but again pulling back, this game of cat and mouse continuing. Maybe the attackers sense the fact that they've already lost a good deal of ground in this battle. Times 6 speed once again. It's impossible for me to commentate over such things. The onus is always on the attackers in this situation. The defenders owe you nothing. They're not going to come out and fight the battle you want. This is what the price of having a significant numbers advantage is. You have to be the ones to initiate, even if it's not a particularly advantageous situation for you. You also run the risk when playing like this, if you do end up losing and the attackers end up sallying forth to beat you, there is nothing more shameful. Blades of Emondria. They are moving in here once again, but Dunlanding veterans leading there, they're already wavering. Wavering in the face of one Snaga, but certainly in the Lurt's hunting pack will be able to defeat the poor Dunlanders. This is a little bit more like it from the attackers though, almost perfectly in sync with the final 10,000 frames. This is something worth bearing in mind as well, like because of how the defenders have elected to position themselves. If the attackers do flood in and really solidify the town centre, they could hold on to it for the time limit to run out. Because of how Medieval 2's mechanics work like that, where it can be a little bit all over the place, like that, it's it's unlikely that they could win the battle that way. This is a little bit bizarre as well. I don't know why these Blades of Emondui are attacking. I guess they're going after the crossbows, but they were always going to have their passage blocked by a unit of infantry that was being held in reserve. Spears of Emondui are moving forwards. Catapults. Are they fighting something? They are, actually. The catapult crew has been engaged in melee by the Woodman Realm Axemen, so it's about time we saw a bit of aggression. Still, the Uruk-hai crossbows will be raining punishment in there. The defenders need to be very careful here. It would be a most unfortunate way to end this battle if they did end up losing by town centre capture when they had this many units around the town centre. The attackers would feel very vindicated in their approach if this were to happen. I mean, Dunland Spearmen going to be given the business by all of Isengard's best units. There's still one champion of the White Hand in here as well, commanding his troops. The Temple Execution is still very much alive. The Trollshaw Axe Throwers being engaged by Uruk-hai crossbows. I don't think the time on it is going to run down completely. I think there's still too many frames, so I'm going to assume the defenders are going to reorganise themselves appropriately. Spears of Orthanc getting into position. Catapults getting destroyed by the throwing axes though. So this tool, which could have been used so effectively on the defence, I mean, we've already seen this happen to the attackers. We're now seeing it happen to the defenders. Only 2 minutes remain. Surely not. They just need to get one unit in here, really, the defenders, and this would stop the countdown. Which, again, I'm sure they will do, because there's simply too many frames left, I think. That is a hit from the catapult, though, before it inevitably gets crumbled right through the middle of that Hiri Pang. Snaga skirmishers trying to get in position to continue the good work they've been doing for the defenders. The Spears of Emondui do end up routing, which means the only thing really standing between the defenders and recapturing the town centre is this one unit of Trollshaw Axe Throwers. Surely not going to be enough to do the business. They are doing a pretty good job though of doing damage there. Getting a bit of friendly fire though on the one unit they really didn't want that to happen to. They're in the town centre though, so that shouldn't be... oh no, they're the attackers, aren't they? Silly me. Another unit of Trollshaw Axe Throwers moving across. Is there another way they can win this though? I mean, surely... Have they actually got still out here? Snaga skirmishers are routing, Dunland and veterans are fighting something here in this corner. Everything, I think, has been committed, so the Palace Guard must be in here somewhere. Indeed, here they are. Yeah, the town centre has been recaptured there. It was a bold move here, and I think if they had maybe formed up a little bit more of a Helm's Deep around the TC, they would have captured it there. There was only like 47 seconds or so of it left. If they had the Palace Guard in there defending it, it's hard to do though. When you're fighting in cramped conditions like this, sometimes Medieval 2 will not do what you want it to. Woodman Protectors, Spears of Orthanc, firing into the backs of these units, so including Elders of the Elven King. They may be able to win outright here, the attackers. It's coming in, I mean it's chaos at this point. I think it's going to come down to who can get the best ranged attacks here and there, which is looking like the attackers so far. But it's also going to be about who is just got the strength left in melee to be able to carry themselves through to victory. With units like the Nars Kai managing to rout off elements of the attacking force. Berserkers are in here. I don't know if this is the fight for Berserkers though. I mean, they'll do damage very, very quickly. They're also going to take damage very, very quickly. And they're also going up against, in Dunland and Mirkwood, not the most armour-centric factions going. Palace Guard still represents such a tricky foe to have to deal with. The catapult The final Caterpillar actually wasn't destroyed by the throwing axes, but it will be dealt with in melee by this unit of woodland protectors. This, I think, is absolutely vital though. They managed to set up a really good firing line. If they shoot at the right targets, I don't think the defenders are going to be able to withstand that kind of punishment for too long. When it's stuff like the Elders of the Elven King as well, that's the kind of unit that is going to be able to look after itself at melee, so you can't just send over a unit of like half-orcs, for example, and hope that they can deal with the situation, because they most assuredly won't. 3 Temple Executioners remain. Things getting very stretched here now. It's proven to be a very competitive battle in the end. It goes to show how well the defenders need to play, I think, to make battles like this work. And despite their caution throughout most of the fight, I think Dunland and Mirkwood have made this a very interesting final battle here in this courtyard. Uruk-hai Berserkers. Defeat seems certain, only a military genius could win this battle. Both of the best skirmishers still doing their thing. Progress towards trying to silence their weapons as well has been blocked. Hiri Peng and the Woodland Protectors stopping Isengard from doing as they please.
Our allies have fled the field like cowards.
Uruk-hai Pikeman defeat seems certain. I mean, the Palace Guard were around here, weren't they? Still 42 of them remaining. I think more and more it's looking like the attackers are going to have what it takes. The Berserkers doing their best, but you can tell now with how quickly they're dying off, their hit points have been expended, so this is the dying embers of their efforts to help their team to victory. Still 8 Snaga. There's still some units that can be used as reinforcements as well. A unit of veterans and a unit of Gwathlo trackers, which may not seem like much, but with their numbers I think that might be enough to put this battle beyond the defenders. The announcer seems to agree, but then he very often will not say that the defenders are turning things around until the 11th hour, but I suppose we're in the 11th hour now, aren't we? Those Woodland Protectors are taking a bit of a beating, but they just need to keep things locked down for a little longer. Elven King's Palace Guard pushing forward, victorious further back. Now they will be able to get into melee over here and start dealing with the clutch of units which the defenders have left, which is the most important to them. What else have we got going on over here? There's still fighting going on here for some reason. Is this just because of routing units? Oh no, that can't be right, because they would be routing to the town centre, not out here. Very peculiar. Very peculiar indeed. I think there's 8 Snaga, yeah, so we're looking more and more of this being the last stand of the defenders, which rather appropriately I suppose is near to where the entrance to MINAS ITHIL's central tower would be. Spears of Orthanc, having 2 units of them going into the red limit, very much the way to go with Dunland in a siege battle like this. Reforged siege battle there, so that'll be Angmar gone. Angmar defeated, Isengard now forced to mount their final stand alone. Having a look at the kill counts, yeah, the attackers now ahead by 5%, so that is going to be that, in spite of, I suppose that is the answer. Mordor may have been the ones to take a beating, but Dunland and Mirkwood had enough come the end of the battle to be able to pull through. And it does also go to show, I think, that Mordor, in spite of the fact that they were taking a beating, they were still able to do damage in return, which is always the key. If you're getting absolutely dumpstered with no reply, that's going to be a problem for your team in the long run, but that wasn't what Darth let happen. So in spite of the fact that it probably wasn't the most satisfying game for him to play, he still contributed greatly to his team's success here.
Our Our men have taken control of the castle.
Dunland now really trying to twist the knife as well with their Snaga. Athol Spearguard running. The Guards of Orthanc will likely fight to the bitter end, and they've got the defensive abilities to stay standing for quite a while. Spears of Orthanc being hunted down by these Uruk-hai, wanting to have some revenge on the traitors from Dunland, using Saruman's crafts against him. There are the Snaga skirmishers doing their thing still. Victory seems certain for all of these Dunlanders still. The Guathlo trackers now being committed, so yeah, that's everything really now that has been sent. I mean, it's not a huge amount left. I mean, and there never was going to be if the attacks were going to be victorious given the damage that Mordor was taking. But this is going to be, in the end, about 5% of the attacking force that remains. Minas ITHIL belongs to them. It's been a while since we've seen this map, but even with more armies on the field, it very much works out in this way most of the time. A fight in the outer layer, the streets are pretty quickly abandoned every time in favour of holding their ground back here. More understandable considering it's a 2v3 rather than a 3v4 or 3v5, but still, maybe one day we'll get to see Minas ITHIL's streets be a more comprehensive part of any battle replay that we see on it. Spears of Orthanc still doing their thing. What remains for the defenders? I see Nazkai carving their way through Snaga. Elders of the Elven King will bring about a swift end to that.
The battle is very much in our favour.
And that is going to be that. I think. Surely they're the last ones left. Is this the Isengard General? No, he's got a two-handed weapon, so he is just a rank and file Nazkai, and it will ultimately be through kills rather than town centre capture, I believe, that this battle is going to end. Close run though. And quite a satisfying battle to behold. I don't know, actually, I think we might be seeing we may actually be seeing a town centre victory rather than anything else. So whoever wins there is going to outlast. Yeah. Isengard just about managing to stay alive while the clock ran down. I suppose that's a victory in and of itself. But yeah, a satisfying bit of battle to behold. The only thing that was missing really was some sort of theme. But again, not the most important thing. A satisfying battle is the best replay after all. I actually would say that the defenders played really well. Like I said, I think I kind of would have liked to have seen them win because of how well they performed with stuff like their trolls and their cavalry on the outside of the field, but ultimately I think what we saw here is the fact that you do need to be careful as the defenders, because Mirkwood and Dunland always had a lot left in the tank, and I think positionally, when Mirkwood and Dunland did come forward, I don't think the defenders were ready for it here in the final layer, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because there's only one way in. You're definitely going to be watching when they're going to be coming, and use of the catapult there could have been a little bit better. Maybe Isengard could have saved their Lurtz hunting pack for later. They used them fairly early and on stuff that maybe wasn't all that important. But these are small margins, but I guess these are the margins by which the defenders will live and die, whereas the attacks have got much more room for error. So it is what it is, but still, the defenders played very well. The attackers, though, still good value for their win, because none of them played particularly badly either. Like I said, Mordor, sometimes it just works out that way, and you've got to be the one to take the punishment, and Mirkwood and Dunland, in the end, were able to make that count, even though I was a little bit worried they were going to be too overcautious and hand the battle to the defenders. My fears were unfounded in the end. So let's see what did the damage for Mirkwood then. They got the most kills among the attackers, which is not too surprising, given what they are. The Palace Guard were only committed very late on, but they still did a lot of damage there, 276 kills, but armour piercing, high melee defence, all the sorts of things which are going to make them very good against a force like Isengard. Woodland Protectors, doing quite well too. Hard to tell which one is which. Could have been the one late on, could have been the one earlier on, who knows. Rangers actually not doing too badly either. I think most of that came about as a result of taking pot shots across the moat around the outside of the settlement, but still, they also got involved in melee later on. Some units getting very low amounts of kills, but some performing quite well. 121 on a unit of Spears of Emenduir isn't too bad. Several units breaking 100 as well, most of which I think archers, but also units that were being committed later. Mirkwood, after all, were only really a true fixture in the battle when the settlement was really being put under stress. So, yeah, I think that battle objectives, one or more required. Capture location succeeded. Destroy or rattle enemies failed. There was like one Isengard combatant left alive. But yeah, big thank you for 2 times for sending this battle replay in, and a big thanks to all the players as well for being a part of it. I know that being on these maps in particular, it does take quite a lot of time to actually get through these battles, so I'm always appreciative when good battle replays are sent in, and it's been a while since we've seen MINAS ITHIL / MINAS Mordor. And yeah, as I've mentioned recently, the schedule might be a little bit patchy over the coming weeks because I'm very likely going to be away for work again at some point in the near future for an extended period, so I'm trying to record as much as I possibly can so that there isn't any disruption to the schedule, but there could very well be. And at the very least, what we're going to be doing is these kind of battle replays are likely going to be sort of Saturday exclusives, whereas it's going to be more smaller pitch battles, I think, which are going to be on the Wednesdays, because I think that will allow me, at least for the next month or so, it will allow me to keep pace on the schedule, which I think is a little bit more important than depleting the schedule a little bit by doing only these kinds of battle replays as I've been doing for the past few months. I think that will be the answer. Yeah, I think that should allow me as well, because it should let me record stuff midweek as well when I get in from work, at least the odd battle here and there, which will help fill out the schedule even more so. So yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It's a little bit frustrating, but as I also mentioned in the recent channel update, it's hopefully the sort of thing which I'm not going to have to put up with for too much longer. Yeah, anyway, regardless of that, we'll not ramble too much. The channel update covered all that I wanted to say on that anyways. As for replays that are coming out soon, I do have quite a few from Winged Swordsman 44, but they are mostly on maps which we've seen quite a bit of in the past, so we'll see what order we want to be doing those in. Yeah, and there's also obviously the Silmarillion ones, which are largely going to be, I think, the Wednesday content for the next couple of weeks or so. We'll see on that one, we'll see. But yeah, that's going to be the thing for now. Still the channel in survival mode, but like I said, hopefully for not too much longer. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.